We're going to have very special music in a moment or two, so I'm letting you know I know you're coming. It's great. I'll look forward to that. Let me gather my voice a little so I can get it out there. Words from Wendell Berry strike me today as being vital for the occasion of Memorial Day. They're a little long, but they have so much beauty in them, I think they're worth enduring. If we have the wisdom to survive, to stand like slow-growing trees on a ruined place, renewing, enriching it, if we will make our seasons welcome here, asking not too much of earth or heaven, then, a long time after we are dead, the lives our lives prepare will live here. Their houses, strongly placed upon the valley sides, fields and gardens rich in the windows, the river will run clear as we will never know it. And over it birdsong like a canopy. On the levels of the hills will be green meadows, stock bells in noon shade. On the steeps where greed and ignorance cut down the old forest, an old forest will stand. Its rich leaf fall drifting on its roots. The veins of forgotten springs will have opened. Families will be singing in the fields. In their voices they will hear a music risen out of the ground. They will take nothing from the ground. They will not return whatever the grief at parting. Memory, native to this valley, will spread over it like a grove, and memory will grow into legend, legend into song, song into sacrament. The abundance of this place, the songs of its people and its birds will be health and wisdom and indwelling light. This is no mere dream, but its hardship is its possibility. With such a vision before us, I invite our wonderful singers to lift us toward worship this morning.
May the air be washed with sunlight. We call this place into peace. The light and shadow of life rest here, and breathe with the breath of the earth. May the air be washed with sunlight. We call this place into peace. The light and shadow of life rest here, and breathe with the breath of the earth.
I would like to point out that our responsive invocation comes from a fellow named Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain, who was a veteran of the Civil War, whose words were frequently part of Ken Burns' series because he was so eloquent. In fact, he was so eloquent because he was a trained academic and ended up being the president, I believe, of Bates or Colby College, and eventually, I believe, the governor of the state of Maine. But he wrote with such grandeur and simplicity. And you may remember words that he wrote to his wife, but these words are different, and they speak to the quality of remembering. In great deeds, something abides. On great fields, something. Forms change and pass, bodies disappear, but spirits linger to consecrate ground for the vision place of souls. Generations that know us not, and that we know not of, heart drawn to see where and by whom great things were suffered and done for them, shall come to this deathless field, to ponder and dream, and lo, the shadow of a mighty presence shall wrap them in its bosom, and the power of the vision pass into their souls. Sure sounds like what we expect of Memorial Day. Good morning and welcome to Fountain Street Church. As I mentioned earlier, I'm Fred Wooden. I am one of the clergy that serve this congregation, and I am glad that you took time out of your holiday weekend to be present with us today. I'm ever grateful for those who make this worship possible, my wonderful music director, and our guest musicians, who are also part of our community in large measure, but you're in a different relationship today, and so I'm grateful to you all. At any rate, I'd like to remind you that this church has been around for almost 150 years. Next year is our 150th anniversary. Formed in 1869 as Fountain Street Baptist Church, and occupying this space for almost all of that time. And so we are celebrating next year that long tenure here, but our hopeful long future that is to come. And so thank you for being with us on one day of the year. If this is your one and only chance, thank you for being here for the 100th or the 1,000th time. Together, we make Fountain Street Church, and all who come here belong here.
My grateful heart, so filled with years of living, memories flow by me like petals on a stream. My grateful heart forgives so many sorrows, brings peace that lasts forever, illuminates the dream. My grateful heart, so filled with years of living, memories flow by me like petals on a stream. My grateful heart forgives so many sorrows, brings peace that lasts forever, illuminates the dream. Our grateful hearts recall your gentle spirit, the blessings of your being surround us like a prayer. Our grateful hearts now feel your spirit soaring, wherever love is shining, we'll always find you there. Our grateful hearts now feel your spirit soaring, wherever love is shining, we'll always find you there.
I do hope you noticed that Linda Jones is not only one of our singers today, but one of those who created that piece, and we are grateful for both gifts. A time for reading on this Memorial Sunday, and I continue to plumb the peculiar depths of the book of Psalms. Peculiar because you never know what you're going to find when you go beyond a few familiar lines. I found these verses 1 through 8 out of Psalm 78. Psalm 78 is quite long, so be grateful that I'm not giving all of it to you this morning. Forgive me. Give ear, my people, to my teaching. Turn your ear to what I say. I will expound a theme. Hold forth on the lessons of the past, things we have heard and known, that our fathers have taught us. We will not withhold them from our children, telling the coming generation the praises of God's might and the wonders God performed. who established a decree in Jacob, ordained a teaching in Israel, charging our forebears to make them known to our children, that a future generation might know, children yet to be born, and in turn tell their children that they might put their confidence in God and forget not the great deeds, but observe the commandments, and not be like their fathers, a wayward and defiant generation, a generation whose heart was inconstant, whose spirit was not true. And a second poem, one of the great poems about grief that I know, from Edna St. Vincent Millay. It's called A Dirge Without Music. It is ferocious in its grief and its truth. I am not resigned to the shutting away of loving hearts into the hard ground. So it is, and so it will be, and so it has been, time out of mind. Into the darkness they go, the wise and the lovely, crowned with lilies and the laurel they go, but I am not resigned. Lovers and thinkers, into the earth with you. Be one with the dull, indiscriminate dust. A fragment of what you felt, of what you knew, a formula, a phrase remains, but the best is lost. The answers, keen and quick, the honest look, the laughter, the love, they are gone. They have gone to feed the roses. Elegant and curled is the blossom, fragrant is the blossom, I know, but I do not approve. More precious was the light in your eyes than all the roses in the world. Down, down, down into the darkness of the grave. Gently they go, the beautiful, the tender, the kind. Quietly they go, the intelligent, the witty, the brave. I know, but I do not approve, and I am not resigned.
We are holding you in our hearts, holding you close in our hearts, in a warm embrace. We are holding you close in our hearts. We are holding you in our hearts, holding you close in our hearts, in a warm
there is something we don't do well in our liberal tradition, of one of several things, by the way, not just the one. We're not good at confessing sins, as though somehow we don't do them. I guarantee I sin. And you can see evidence of it today in your bulletin, which ordinarily would include all the names I'm about to read, but failure to communicate effectively on my part means they were not listed here, but I have their names. For it is the custom in this church on this Sunday to list, read, commemorate, and honor those who of this community died from one Memorial Day to the next. Therefore, our prayer consists largely of those names. Ordinarily, I don't read the sacred prayer until just before the sermon, but this morning I ask that you indulge me as I give it before we read the names of those that are dear to us, that we commemorate especially this day. Elmele Rachamim Shokim Rachamim Hamzayach, God filled with mercy, dwelling in the heavens' heights, bring proper rest beneath the wings of your presence to the souls of our beloved who have gone to their eternal place of rest in the last year. May you, who are a source of mercy, shelter them beneath your wings eternally. Bind their souls to you and to we the living, that they may rest in peace, that we may be at peace, and let us say, Amen. We lift up in honor and memory and love the names of Paul Fuller, Barbara Jean Kepler, Eve Cranenberg, Barbara Leedy, Drusilla Hillman Richard, Aileen Goddard, David Burkholder, Joanne Earl, Sarah Borish, Jack Normaine Kimmel, Paul Buzz Cucci Jr., Charles Chuck Saddam, Susan Verdine Miller, Steele Anderson Taylor, Thomas Blandford, Jean Kruger, Val Nelson, Will Bocci, Virginia Hewitt, Dennis Kozarek. These words of Stephen Spender be a blessing upon them. Near the snow, near the sun in the highest fields, see how these names are fetid by the waving grass and by the streamers of white cloud and whispers of wind in the listening sky. The names of those who in their lives fought for life, who wore at their hearts the fire's center. Born of the sun, they traveled a short while towards the sun and left the vivid air signed with their honor. And so we gather our hearts in silence and turn our ears toward music in memory, gratitude, and honor. Every widow wakes one morning, perhaps after years of pure and unwavering grieving, to realize she slept a good night's sleep and will be able to eat breakfast and doesn't hear her husband's ghost all the time. So writes Jonathan Safran Foer. He continues, every parent who loses a child finds a way to laugh again. The edge dulls, the hurt lessens. Every love is carved from loss. Mine was, yours is, your great-great-great-grandchildren's will be. But we learn to live in that love. Every week I scour the words of others as I consider what now I will talk with you one more time. Fortunately, the internet has brought wonderful words closer than they used to be. And every week I hope some fragment of wisdom or insight that I find or think, some solace will come to a world that is wrapped in the boundless night of immensity, eternity, and obscurity. Words like those of Jonathan Safran Foer are like meteors slicing a line of light across a dark sky. If I sound sad, it is so, because the occasion merits it. It is Memorial Day and a ritual of recollection, a time for giving honor to others and to our own sadness. But as I ponder it, it seems we're only good at this for one day a year. It's as though we want to do it, but not too much. Being sad is, in a certain sense, rather un-American. We are a nation formed around a future, not a past, of what ought to happen, not what has happened. We don't bear our grudges or nurse our wounds. And similarly, liberal religion is not about remembering the good old days, but trying to create good new days, pointing more to a future than to a past. And so dwelling on old things, dead things, is hardly very American and not very liberal after all. It's a little bit like Miss Havisham, and those of you who know Dickens' story, an old woman who lived in Satis House and Great Expectations, who wore her wedding gown for years after being left at the altar and devoted almost the rest of her life to nursing that loss, eventually being imprisoned by it. Grief can do that. We have seen it in others. We know how it can freeze the living in the embrace of the dead. I'd like to speak about grief this morning, not only in that context, but in others. It is an emotion, a powerful emotion we experience after a powerful loss. And all this month I have focused on the theme of remembering as a focus in my examination of the book of Psalms. This is Memorial Day weekend, and tomorrow is the day itself. It arose spontaneously in the years after the Civil War, which war still accounts for at least half of all our war dead in all our history. Imagine that. Doing something to acknowledge that loss was inevitable. Women, especially mothers and wives, North and South, felt they had to do something. Over time, though, it became more of an official patriotic occasion, more red, white, and blue than crepe and lavender. It also is the occasion many of us, not just here at Fountain Street Church, but certainly we acknowledge all those who have died and are dear to us. It is supposed to be a tender and moving and poignant time. But as I said, reserving an hour out of the year scarcely equals the loss and the grief that we who know it bear it. At some point I read that most people think it takes about 2 weeks to get over a death. They have not been there yet. Yes, there are some who grieve for years and years, like Miss Havisham. Queen Victoria herself withdrew from public life for a decade after Prince Albert died in 1861. She was so lowered and diminished by her grief that the people were beginning to think it was time to do away with the monarchy. She ceased to be a queen. But even after she was coaxed back into public life, she wore mourning dress for the rest of her life. So somewhere between the naivete of 2 weeks and the rest of your life lies the reality that grief is something we carry for a while. It is something that becomes part of us. It was the death of my father 19 years ago that drove me first into a synagogue on a Saturday morning because I had a friend there, a rabbi, and I knew they had the custom there of allowing those who were grieving to say the last prayer of the service, essentially a benediction. And it was the way that I could stand and carry my grief in worship, because my church had no custom for acknowledging. Oh, there were memorial services, but after that it was take home the food, but don't show it too much. And I needed to show it. I didn't need to cry. I needed to be present with my grief as a man, as a son, in a church, but I couldn't, so I went to a synagogue where my grief was a welcome part of their spiritual life. Not to share, but just to acknowledge. And just this month being May, which is my month of mourning in general, because it was on May 8th of 1999 that my father died. And that Saturday I was at the synagogue and standing and saying Kaddish. And this today is the day where our first son was born and died on the same day, stillborn, May 27th, 1983, and I stand in honor of his non-life, but very real presence. Those who have borne it know grief, as Jonathan Safran Foer notes. It does dull, it softens, it moves from the foreground to the background, but it never vanishes, ever. That is the point I wish to bring forward. They say grief is a journey, but that says too little because it implies an ending. It is not an ending. It is a path you walk for the rest of your life. And if it's first it is a selva scura, a dark wood as Dante calls it, you will find yourself entering open fields later. You will go through meadows. You will be delighted with what life hands you later. But the wood will always be there. And you will come to love that shadow as the accompaniment to the sunshine. And sure enough, May 10th, almost a year later, our elder son was born, who thrives this day in Chicago. And here is the most ironic and beautiful and terrible part. Had we not lost the first, we would never have the second. Grief and joy tied together. Tied together, which is the point. Joy and woe are woven fine, clothing for the soul divine, writes William Blake. And we in the liberal tradition, we who tend to be familiar with the middle classes, with lives without day-to-day suffering, tend to think church should be rather uplifting and forward-thinking and encouraging. And I'm here to say that we have only half the story if we do only that. Grief is not only inevitable, it is essential to our humanity because it will come to you if it has not come, and it will be difficult, and it will be precious. A life lived without loss and grief would be far poorer indeed. Can you imagine a life lived without any suffering? Would you imagine they could possibly care about anyone other than themselves? It would be a shallower life, incapable of sympathy, void of wisdom. It is loss and grief and sorrow that makes us whole. And yet we say so little about it. And we call ourselves to grow spiritually by thinking deep thoughts and imagining far distant enlightened clouds of glory, whether in Bibles or in Qurans or any place else, forgetting that it is to the depth we must go to find where we stand in our hearts. I'm here to tell you a daring and difficult truth as I know it. The true heart of our liberal faith is not the free mind imagining what is possible, but the broken heart remembering the suffering. A heart broken by grief can turn the brokenness of the wound into a husk from which a seed can grow that can hear the pain of others in new and healing ways. When we have known heartbreak, we can see it in others and feel a kindness for someone we have never met. Anyone here ever been in a support group? What is it you share? You share the struggle, not the joy, the sorrow, not the victory. We find our camaraderie of the Spirit in the shared burdens of life, not the shared victories. Dostoevsky in Crime and Punishment wrote, "The darker the night, the brighter the stars, the deeper the grief, the closer to God." Yes, too much loss and grief can befall anyone. We know too sadly of soldiers who never recover from battle, who lose their lives to post-traumatic stress disorder. Without physically dying, their souls are demolished. Children who endure abuse and neglect have no joy to go with any of their woe. The constant degradations of racism or sexism or poverty heap loss upon loss, sorrow upon sorrow. I know this, you know this, and we who have borne grief and loss, that is why we work against them. It is not just because it is wrong, but because it causes pain in us. That's what sympathy means, to feel the pain of another, because we have felt it ourselves. But that's not enough either. At some level, we grow into something larger than our grief. When I was about 8 years old, I did a stupid thing, which is what 8-year-old boys do on a daily basis, I know. I got on my little bicycle to demonstrate my capacities, and we lived in such a place as there was a driveway next to our house, but it was submerged by a few feet, and there were brick walls on either side. I won't go into the details, but let's just say, in showing off, I went over one wall, sailed through the air, and crashed into the other wall, my bike and me. Nothing was broken, but I was very well cut up, and I was bleeding from a variety of places and weeping in a very considerable way. In the long run, I healed, of course, but I ended up with scars, a long one on my shoulder, several on my right hand, but you can't see them today. It's not that they grew smaller. I grew larger. The scars are always there, but spiritually we can grow larger so they become less than the whole of us. I grieve my first son who died 35 years ago. I grieve my third son who died 30 years ago. My mother who died 14 years ago. My father who died 19 years ago. And all the other relatives that you have and you have lost too. And I am glad of it. For my grief reminds me of my love and what is precious to me, and what is precious to me about you. I read the names of our dead and read the names and see the faces and hear the voices, even those that I only knew a bit about. And I lift them up, and there's a tender part of me. There is nothing more rich, more wise, more good than the lives of those who have gone before. It is a grief so pure that it is itself a sacrament. Now, where do I go from here? This led me to thinking, and now I'm going to get into trouble. It occurred to me, how do I start? This is either my last or my second to last Memorial Day with you. I have something I want to tell you as a church. I have not told you because I don't want you chasing after me with torches and pitchforks. But the door is now closer. It's either a year away or 2. A year before I arrived, the most eminent presence in this church for over half a century died, Duncan Littlefair. I never met him, and I was told how unfortunate it was that I never did. He served this church officially for 36 years, remained a part of the community from then to the moment he died, another 24 years, 60 years of presence. The interim minister who I did know, a woman named Judith Walker Riggs, told me when I talked to her on the phone before I was offered the call that her goal was to bury him. She failed. He did die on her watch, not because of her, I emphasize. He was already 92. She failed insofar as that the death of the man was not the departure of the man. Across the street here at the community college is a statue with a quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson that reads, "An institution is but the lengthened shadow of a man." And this church embodies that more than most. You are substantially what he was, and eagerly and loyally. It was a huge loss in 2004. My colleague here some years ago, Matthew Cockram, trained as a chaplain, after being here for a year, looked around and told me something that I will now give you. You have never mourned the loss of Duncan Littlefair. That is to say, let the loss sink in. Let the departure become more than a departure. I was time and again told stories about him by every member as though they were letting me know that you couldn't meet him, but I can impart him to you. I had people tell me how he conducted worship, how the lights were arranged, how things should be done. His words are on the narthex. They're part of the building. He may be dead, but he is not gone. We have not outgrown the loss. Which is to say, the church has not grown as an institution larger than the man who left. This is not uncommon. I've seen it happen dozens of times. And I've tried to help that along, but, I haven't been successful. But the reality is that you, this church, and I say you because I will not be part of you long enough to see it happen, you must choose to outgrow your grief. I had come here with the expectation that I would start a new chapter. Ha! Silly me. I came here to close a chapter. And like all good undertakers and bereavement counselors, it was my job to be with you in the railing and the denying and the bargaining and in the anger. To bear the sorrow that could not be shared every place else. That has meant occasionally being judged inadequate and incompetent, rejected, abandoned, and sometimes even held in contempt. All things that happen to those who go with the bereaved. And I decided a few years ago I would love you no matter what. And I do. I've loved you longer than any other church I've known, because that's what you need. And only lately have I seen that being honored or admired was never the point. It was just to let you grieve, because it's going to take a while. So now we go back to the psalm. Give ear, O my people, to my teaching. Turn your ear to what I say. I will expound a theme. It is time for you to reach back before you even remember this church so you can reach forward. It is time to hold forth from the lessons from the past, not merely the facts of the past. To hold up a church larger than Duncan ever was and larger than you will ever see. To be that forest Wendell Berry talked about, to create the fields, the forests, the streams that you will not visit, but they will. Hold forth the lessons of the past, things we have heard and known. Do not withhold them. Tell the coming generation of your might and the wonders you performed, that a generation might know, children yet to be born. I know better than any of you that the church of tomorrow has not been born. And it will come and not know Duncan, it won't know me, and I don't care. Because Fountain Street Church is a vast forest, an immense wood with dark and open and green and gray places that you are still traveling from. And those who are coming crave a place and a people larger than their own individual joy, their own personal woe. They crave a place where they can outgrow their sorrow. And they crave a cause larger than their own struggle. A story that is still being written, not just being remembered. You have to decide if they will have that place. Only you. I cannot. I tried to do it for you, and you told me it was not my job, and you were right. But you have to outgrow your grief. Grow larger in heart and spirit. Come to a place where new joy will come that did not know me or David or Duncan or Milton or Alfred or John or any one of those who stood in this or any other pulpit. That will be their joy forever, and that we will only be able to be remembered from time to time. That children yet to be born may know. Yes, let us remember. And so let us dream as well. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be found true in thy sight, thou who art my rock and my Redeemer.